You think ADA will still outperform BTC in the
Of
future?
course, because how much farther can Bitcoin go? Maybe to a million. Okay, it's a 10x. ADA can go 100x, 1000x over this. It's like, guys, we're not a second class citizen. Cardano does substantially more. And because of Bitcoin DeFi, it's going to end up probably being the yield layer of Bitcoin. And so it's going to get a huge halo effect from that. And because of the launch model of Midnight, partner chains are going to bring in airdrops almost annually to ADA.
This episode is brought to you by Scale, the next evolution in layer one blockchains. Explore the gas-free ecosystem at scale.space/ecosystem and follow their journey on X at Scale Network. Thanks to Scale for making today's episode possible. Nothing said on Empire is a recommendation to buy or sell any investments or products. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and the views expressed by anyone on the show are solely their opinions, not financial advice or necessarily the views of Blockworks. Our hosts, guests, and the Blockworks team may hold positions in the companies, funds, or projects discussed. All right, everyone, welcome back to Empire. I have been waiting to do this episode for a solid 4 or 5 years. We finally got the man, the myth, Charles Hoskinson from Cardano on the show. So Charles, welcome finally to Empire.
Yano, it's so good to be on, man. How you been?
I have been good. Good to see you. Good to see you. Dude, we were talking about some other people in the industry before we hit record, and you used the word, they are an institution in crypto. And I would say that you are an institution in crypto. I'm just curious, what your life looks like these days.
I mean, I'm just the jackass who didn't retire. So now I'm doing all the side quests, right? It's crazy because career-wise, when you look at crypto, I've been in the room for the creation of about $450 billion worth of value, from Ethereum to Cardano, BitShares, and there's not a single project I haven't somewhat in some way been part of. Like, I was the founding chairman of the Bitcoin Foundation's education committee, and I started the Bitcoin Education Project way back in the day. And so with all these things, I've watched Bitcoin go from under $1 to, basically $120,000 Leviathan. I've watched us go from no one cared to the US government tried to kill us to the US government's buying our tokens. So it's like crazy when you look at the totality of all of that. But what people really don't know is that I diversified after 2021. I said, if all I do is crypto, I'd be a very boring life, because while crypto is super important, crypto is important as an enabler to other things. The purpose of cryptocurrencies is to rewrite the economic, political, and social systems of the world. All it is just this trust MacGuffin. It creates an environment where people who don't trust each other can trust each other in a new way, and then it enables new types of business. So I said, well, you're never going to get anywhere with mainstream adoption of crypto unless you go and do things with crypto. So necessarily that forced me to diversify a little bit. And I went into agriculture. I bought a bison ranch and I raised bison, got 11,000 acres and hundreds of bison. But that means I can start tracking and tracing my animals using a blockchain and thinking about growing stuff and how that relates to blockchain technology. I have a medical clinic with 15,000 patients up in Gillette, Wyoming. And we can now start thinking about electronic health record systems and blockchain. I do stuff in biotechnology, like we have a big stem cell program that we're doing a lot of deep R&D. So then I get to think about medical data, and I get to think about the monetization of medical data, clinical trials, these types of things with blockchain. Then we have a venture studio with input output, and we do more than Cardano. The venture studio is building Midnight. The venture studio is building Quantum Hosky, and we can get into that. It's one of the coolest projects I've ever worked on in my entire career. And these things, we now get to think about privacy and GameFi and meme coins, and we get to think about the innovation process and launching a company every year and doing something in a different vertical. We're working on a lot of deep R&D projects, and now that we're starting to get to kind of a certain point, there's a long backlog of things that I've always wanted to solve, and some of them are in the crypto space, and some of them are outside of the crypto space.
Yeah.
And some of them are just out there. Like, I have a program that I'm going to go to the Monroe Institute and do a multi-day training in person with an old CIA guy that ran Project Stargate to do remote viewing. I mean,
So somehow not surprised by that, Charles.
I
Somehow not.
but
Are you
go ahead.
you've been in the industry for, like you said, longer than most, and you've been firsthand witness to pretty much everything. Are you impressed by how much crypto has accomplished, or let down, or I actually, to kind of prep for this, listened to some of your really old interviews from back in the day, like a decade ago. And a lot of the things that you were predicting have actually kind of come true. Like the government would you're kind of calling and saying the government would start to attack us once we got big enough, and a bunch of different things in the industry.
Yeah.
Bitcoin going well above six figures. You were calling for that very very early days. Are you impressed by how much we've accomplished? Or are you let down by the lack of accomplishments? How do you feel about where the industry's gotten so far?
Isn't it funny that we're never allowed to have a win?
Never, never. Yeah.
15 years, we've gone from under $1 billion, no one cares, there's no one end, to half a billion people, trillions of dollars, the US government holding it. And we're right at an inflection point where mass adoption is about to happen. We'll have billions of users and be a 10 trillion market by the end of the decade. And crypto is literally percolating and entering into everything. There's blockchain research labs at every Fortune 500 company, and the rate of technological progress is growing parabolically. So yes, we've achieved enormous things. There's frustrations in that people continue to look at crypto only as a financial product, and they say, "Is it a security or commodity?" And I've always said it is a trust engine to think about the economic, political, and social systems of the world. So to
Mm,
me, it makes a lot more sense to start saying, let's get crypto into real world applications and real life things. The reason they're not there yet is actually technological. We spent a long time figuring out how to do smart contracts, a long time figuring out governance structures, a long time figuring out interoperability, like the bridges and hybrid applications, these types of things. We didn't think too much about the privacy and the identity side of the equation. And the thing is, anything that's real world business, it has a public side and a private side. So, if you run a company, you have an HR department. Are all your HR files public record? No, we keep them private. We don't want to know, what little Bobby was doing in the bathroom. So you probably want to have a private side. So you can't put all that on a blockchain. But the problem is that when you want to do a real world thing, if you have a blockchain and non-blockchain side, you collapse the entire trust, privacy, and control model of that to the non-blockchain side. So
mm,
it's like it's basically centralized. Circle is a great example where it runs on all these blockchains, but there's a centralized issuer, a centralized actor. So at the end of the day, it's not really a blockchain ethos compatible product, because at any time it just gets collapsed to one single entity, and you just have to go talk to that entity to freeze and seize and recall, and to create a panopticon to reveal what people have been buying with their stuff. So you
yeah.
really want privacy inside the conversation, but you need programmable privacy and selective disclosure. Now, once we have those components, what that does is that opens up the real world application space, and that's where you get the mainstream adoption. That's where the Magnificent Seven come in. That's where everyday consumers are using it on their cell phone. That's when grandma's using it. That's when we actually get to 2 or 3 billion users, and blockchain basically percolates into the world, and TradFi and DeFi go away and they become Fi. Just like kind
Mm,
of like legacy media and internet media became media, and everything just kind of blended together. That's where we're heading with all of that. And I think that's the last generation. We're currently late third generation in the technology. I got on board late first generation, mid first generation, and then created the second generation with Vitalik and the other guys, was a pioneer in the third generation with Cardano. And now we're with Midnight in the fourth generation, but that's the last mile. And once we have it, we'll get billions of adoption. And then everything else, we won't talk about crypto anymore, because, like, who talks about internet anymore? Like,
yeah.
we suppose when you build a product that there's going to be an internet connection to that product. We don't even, it's not a differentiating USP or something you even discuss.
This episode is brought to you by Scale, the next evolution in layer one blockchains. With a gas-free, invisible user experience, instant finality, and robust security, Scale allows for limitless scalability and has already saved its 50 million users over $11 billion in gas fees. Scale's high throughput, zero transaction costs, and powerful Web3 infrastructure make it the ideal platform for gaming, AI, and other high throughput apps. To explore the gas-free ecosystem, visit scale.space/ecosystem and follow their journey on X at Scale Network. That's Scale spelt with a K. Thanks to Scale for making today's episode possible. Katana isn't another new general purpose blockchain. It's purpose built for DeFi users to provide the best experience possible. It does this by sustainably generating deeper liquidity and higher yield than any other network. If your assets are sitting idle, then they're dead. Katana is built from the ground up with DeFi mechanics to bring your bags back to life. All you have to do is bridge over, and Katana does the rest for you. Incubated by Polygon Labs and GSR, Katana launches with a notable ecosystem of primitives, assets, and partners like Morpho, Sushi, Vertex, Lombard, Chainlink, and Yearn. Be early to Katana. Join the pre-deposit campaign before mainnet opens at the end of this month. Deposit funds and open rewards filled with randomized amounts of KAT tokens. There's also a CryptoPunk and other exclusive NFTs hidden for the lucky ones. As always, investments in blockchain technology involve risk, terms, and conditions apply. How do you balance, Charles? I mean, you have a strong backbone of what you believe. I feel like privacy maybe is one example here. How do you balance these things that you believe, but also maybe if you believe them too much, it makes it so that user acquisition and developer acquisition actually slows down. Like I'm looking at, I think you guys are looking at DeFi Llama. You guys are the 20th largest chain right now by a metric that they look at on here. I think it's TVL that I'm looking at here. Things like Ethereum and Solana and Tron and Arbitrum and Sui and Hyperliquid are bigger than you guys right now.
Yeah.
And how do you think about that dichotomy?
Yeah, well, it didn't bother me too much. KPIs and metrics, just to discuss that, it always depends on what you value. So, like, Bitcoin has no DeFi market and very little TVL, and it's all in layer twos. So, it's the most successful cryptocurrency, and it's the one that everybody acknowledges is going to be around forever without any doubt. And it is zero on many of these metrics. And so Cardano is always like a hybrid where it has a lot of Bitcoin's ethos, and we tried to start from resilient decentralization, gradually build up and then work our way into the DeFi space. And we were very late to the game with smart contracts. And there's certain things that made it a little bit more difficult to build that side, like the UTXO development model. On the other hand, they give us massive competitive advantages when you look at Bitcoin DeFi, because now Bitcoin wants to do DeFi, and it's a lot easier to write UTXO smart contracts on Cardano than it is to write those on Ethereum or Solana. So, when you look at these generational things, sometimes your time hasn't come yet. So what I do is I say, start always with the principles and look to the future and ask yourself, where is it going in 10 years? Like when I did the Bitcoin
Mm,
education project, I had a slide in 2013 where I talked about what would have to happen for $10,000 Bitcoin, which was inconceivable when Bitcoin was $4. But we talked about it and said, well, these are the fundamental characteristics that have to be there. So when you look architecturally, you see in the next 5 or 10 years, the guys are always coming and going. It was Ethereum was the big dog, and then Solana was the big dog, and now people are talking about Sui and Aptos, and there's always this next big thing that's going to go kill all these other things. And if you're chasing that tail, you're never going to get anywhere because you're always chasing something that was in the making 3 years ago or 5 years ago. You have to predict the future.
yeah.
And so when you look at TVL, like what's the biggest grower of TVL for the next 5 years? It's going to be real world assets. And those are going to be nested in systems with privacy. It's going to be private stable coins. And, again, you need a system with that capability. So we got Midnight coming out. And also where the user is going to come from, the liquidity going to come from, the vast majority of that's going to come from Bitcoin. Even 3 or 4% is like
Yeah.
tens of
Yeah.
billions of dollars of value. And this is an opportunity that's 4 times larger than the market cap of Ethereum and Solana combined, when you look at
Yeah.
Bitcoin DeFi as an opportunity. So, we look at the long arc and we say, are we in a competitive position for that? And we think we are. And also it depends on how you count it. Like, for some reason, Ethereum gets to count its locked stake as TVL. We don't. If you count our stake that participates in consensus as TVL, our TVL would be $14 billion. So we don't get that on DeFi Llama. They don't report that metric. Well, if you look at the list, where would we be on the list if we had a $14
Mm,
billion TVL? You see, so some of these other things are that our technology is different. And so unfortunately, it gets held against us. TPS is another example where if you go to eeutxo.org, you can see real time the Cardano network. And what people don't understand is that one Cardano transaction can be many transactions together because of the input out the UTXO model. So each output can be an event, and EUTXO actually shows that. So when you go real time, you can actually see transactions falling. And when you look at the transaction embedded, there's an NFT being issued and money being moved and a DEX swap happening in one transaction. So they say, oh, well, look at your TPS rate. It's falling. Well, yeah, because people are more efficiently using transactions, and one transaction can be 100 events or 200 events. So no, it's not a lack of utilization. It's a more efficient utilization of a finite and scarce resource,
Yeah.
that we have. But it's so unfortunately, because these are apples to oranges comparisons, they cause problems. So I don't tend to think about them too much. I tend to think about the first principles, and I tend to think about where is the industry going? Where will the users come from? Where will real value come from? What's going to be, kind of the next big thing? And are we architecturally and philosophically aligned with that? And then also, where have we screwed the pooch? Where have we done things wrong?
Yeah.
And, how do we change that? So we're moving to a multi-client environment. So it's not just Haskell anymore. You got Rust and Go and TypeScript. We have multiple programming languages now for smart contract development. So it's not just Haskell anymore. You can write Rust smart contracts with Aiken and TypeScript smart contracts and these types of things. So developer accessibility, has dramatically improved. And then also Midnight as a project has fixed a lot of broken windows and interoperability. So suddenly we're now on Brave with 91 million new users. Now we're on blockchain.com and soon to be bitcoin.com. And we have a lot of custodians now supporting Cardano native assets and ADA. So now Copper's in and all these other guys are in. 108 deals over the last years, which is one every 3 days. So we're kind of getting that interoperability thing so that Cardano is no longer an island. And I think that'll massively improve the TVL side.
So before going too deep into kind of Cardano versus the rest of the industry and stuff like that, I feel like you can't talk about Cardano without talking about the Uber drivers, and I want to know how this became kind of, I think, the best, like a meme essentially. I mean, I feel like you've got like the class of 2017 kind of got, Chainlink and Sergey got the Link Marines, and another person got the, like, Neo had like the Ethereum of Asia. You guys got somehow in with the Uber crowd, and I want to know the story here. How did this happen?
I don't know. I mean, I've heard that, and there's this weirdness that and it sometimes comes from, like, the podcasting elite, like the bankless people in Ethereum land, where they say, "Well, there's no compelling real reason why Cardano can win or be successful or have adoption, so there just must be this large cabal of misinformed people, whether it be the hairdresser or the Uber driver or the waitress who's just buying Cardano, and it's a cult, and there's no real value there." It's a pejorative in many cases when people say that. And meanwhile, we've been right about everything. Like Vitalik is saying, "Hey, maybe we should have liquid non-custodial staking." We've had it since the beginning. Vitalik is saying, "Hey, UTXO is actually useful. We should probably find a path to do that, especially for the zero knowledge stuff." We've had it since the beginning. We said, "Hey, formal methods matters." We've been running 8 years straight, 24/7, and we haven't had a major hack. Meanwhile, there's $80 million to $100 million a day in hacks and other ecosystems. So we say these things. We wrote 250 plus papers. We have 168 scientists. We did the work. We wrote the code. And then somehow, despite all of that, we're super slow. Our technology's obsolete. I don't even know what that means. And there's no compelling adoption or technical reason to be there. And we have a four. And by the way, we have 4.5 million people now in the Cardano ecosystem. So year after year, net, we continue to grow in terms of the raw population. And then they say, well, the only reason they're growing is because it's a cult and misinformed people with no understanding of crypto are buying it, and it's there. And yet we're a thought leader for many of these things, and we have long arc bets that we've made. So if I give them the benefit of the doubt, maybe it's because common people agree with the philosophy and principles. They enjoy
Yeah.
the decentralization. They just enjoy that we care about freedom of association, commerce, and expression, and they just want a system that's philosophically pure. And they say, hey, if I'm going to get into crypto, I want crypto to solve real problems economically, politically, and socially. In my AMAs, I talk a lot about what crypto does for society as a whole. I say things like, hey, you're angry. There's a big chunk of the American population angry about the 2020 election and said that the votes were stolen. Fine, don't complain about it, fix it. So blockchain can fix it. We can actually have a voting system where we can audit and know that the system has not been tampered with and know that your vote has been counted correctly. That's what blockchain can do for you. They say, well,
Mm.
I'd like to have a system like that. Or, you could have another thing about disclosures, whistleblowing, and other things. So let's say you run a big organization, you want a whistleblowing system so people can alert that the CEO is doing something wrong or the CFO is stealing money or things like, well, that's zero knowledge technology. So these aren't hypothetical things. These are things that come up politically, economically, socially on a daily basis. Abuses of power, theft, waste, fraud, and abuse, and fundamentally a lack of trust. And so we come in and we say blockchain is going to solve that. And my entire career, whether it's been Bitcoin or Ethereum or Cardano or now Midnight, I've been saying these are the tools of freedom. So people hear that, the Uber driver hears that, and a lot of these people, especially at the lower rungs of the economic ladder, they're angry because they feel like they don't have a voice. They're adrift on a boat where they can't decide where it's gonna go, and they're basically victims of circumstance, and they're told, "By the way, in 5 or 10 years, you're gonna lose your job to a humanoid robot or AI." So they're like, "We gotta have a better system. Late stage capitalism is a bad deal." So they look to crypto and they say, "This is the escape valve for us to get out." When you look at the marketing of Solana or the marketing of Ethereum or the marketing of many of these other newer things like Sphere Aptos, it's so focused on Web3 stuff, like, how do we get more yield? How do you get more TVL? Look at our growth. Look at our TPS rate. What the fuck does that mean philosophically to anybody? When you look at the marketing of Bitcoin, it doesn't talk about any of that. It says Bitcoin is the antidote, Bitcoin's the solution. And you notice how Bitcoin has the strongest community and the
Yeah.
largest community, and it still preserves and protects its value.
So how
So
important is storytelling then, right?
it's
Because it is
100%.
yeah. I do notice like you like I mean, you've got more money like you could retire if you wanted to. I think that's no surprise, right? You could go chill on the ranch and you could
Right.
like, you know, fly the jet and stuff like that. Why are you I mean, you're out here making like daily YouTube videos. Why is this so like why are you still doing this?
Because we haven't accomplished the mission yet. We're not
Yeah.
done until blockchain's in every facet of society and it holds people honest. You got to remember where I came from. I was the Ron Paul guy. And we had three simple things. We wanted to follow the Constitution, we wanted to have sound money, and we wanted a humble foreign policy. Are we following the Constitution in the United States of America? No. Do we have a humble foreign policy? We just bombed Iran. Okay, no, we don't have a humble foreign policy. We're still running around doing crazy shit. And do we have sound money? We have $35 trillion national debt heading to $50 trillion. It's
Yeah.
burning itself out. And, people are getting systemically poorer.
What
When you talk
what what
about
do you
those.
mean we're not what do you mean we're not following the Constitution? I agree with you on the second two, but what do you mean by
Oh
that?
my lord, there's massive constitutional abuses. First, the Constitution said only gold and silver could be money. We don't even follow that. Do you think we really have freedom of speech? Nah, not really. Do you think we really have a freedom? Like, do you think the government's not spying on us right now? Palantir just got, the world's best spy deal ever to create total information awareness and read everybody's stuff. Every place you look, FISA courts are fundamentally unconstitutional. Patriot Act is fundamentally unconstitutional. Only Congress has authority to initiate conflict, but yet the president can just unilaterally bomb people without congressional approval or consent. You have people being arrested without due process. Anwar al-Awlaki, a U.S. citizen, was killed without due process in a non-combat setting. You don't have to be Noam Chomsky to see the enormous civil rights violations, procedural violations, and just the scope and scale of the U.S. government. There's no constitutional authorization for most of the bureaucracy of the United States. They just created it during the progressive era and they brought it out. There's unconstitutional agencies like the Federal Reserve. It's neither a private nor a public institution. So, what branch of the US government is the Federal Reserve in? Is it an executive branch? Then Trump should be able to fire the head of the Federal Reserve. Is it a legislative branch? Well, then they would be subject to legislative oversight and GAO audit, but they're neither. So, how can we, when the Constitution doesn't give us the right to do this, create an organization that it transcends the US government? It's almost like a fourth branch just for
Yeah.
fun and have that
So
run for 100 years. And by the way, it's not a small thing. Your entire life, what do? You look at your bank account every day. You go to work. Why do you go to work? To make money. What money are you making? The US dollar. And so the thing that controls whether that's valuable or not valuable, you as a person in a representative republic have no say over the leadership of it, the management of it, and you're not even allowed to audit that organization. I don't think the founding fathers stood up for bullshit like that, man.
this episode is brought to you by Scale, the next evolution in layer one blockchains. With a gas-free, invisible user experience, instant finality, and robust security, Scale allows for limitless scalability and has already saved its 50 million users over $11 billion in gas fees. Scale's high throughput, zero transaction costs, and powerful Web3 infrastructure make it the ideal platform for gaming, AI, and other high throughput apps. To explore the gas-free ecosystem, visit scale.space/ecosystem and follow their journey on X at Scale Network. That's Scale spelt with a K. Thanks to Scale for making today's episode possible. Katana isn't another new general purpose blockchain. It's purpose built for DeFi users to provide the best experience possible. It does this by sustainably generating deeper liquidity and higher yield than any other network. If your assets are sitting idle, then they're dead. Katana is built from the ground up with DeFi mechanics to bring your bags back to life. All you have to do is bridge over, and Katana does the rest for you. Incubated by Polygon Labs and GSR, Katana launches with a notable ecosystem of primitives, assets, and partners like Morpho, Sushi, Vertex, Lombard, Chainlink, and Yearn. Be early to Katana. Join the pre-deposit campaign before mainnet opens at the end of this month. Deposit funds and open rewards filled with randomized amounts of KAT tokens. There's also a CryptoPunk and other exclusive NFTs hidden for the lucky ones. As always, investments in blockchain technology involve risk, terms, and conditions apply. Let's get into politics a little bit. I mean, so there's this New York Times article the other day. And I mean, you got basically it says there's like the people who shaped crypto in the United States. You got a big picture of Trump here, and you got Bill Zanker, you got David Sachs, you got who do we have here? Eric Trump. Who else do we have here? You've got David Bailey, Brad
Yep.
Garlinghouse, and you have you right here. And there's only like 10 people on this list. So and you mentioned you're a Ron Paul guy. So what do you make of just the politics in America today?
Well, I mean, we're a three planks of government. You have judicial, executive, and legislative. And during the evils of the Biden administration, the only thing that saved our industry was the judiciary. The judges stepped in and said the SEC does not have the authority to do for this gargantuan overreach, and it started swatting them down. And the repudiations got worse and worse as the abuses of power grew. But it was the last stand because if the judges stood with the executive branch, we would have been fucked as an industry. So now we're in a situation where Trump has enabled and empowered the legislative branch because of the Republican majority to actually pass laws to restructure and rebuild the entire US view of the cryptocurrency side. So what happened was that after he got elected, created crypto czar. It was very fluid time, and it wasn't clear who was going to be that. I think Elon Musk picked David Sachs because he kind of jumped the queue from all the people that interviewed and talked about it. And David basically created a process to have the legislative branch start passing laws. So we've been working very closely with the legislative side. We just had a roundtable with 4 different senators and 35 staffers. Actually, it was the day the Genius Act passed. And we talked a lot about clarity and the market structure. And we did have some discussions about Genius. We really were keen on Section 14. We put in the NIST stuff. And so what we've been focused on IO has been primarily the legislative process and and we tried to engage with the White House, but if you read that particular article, it talked about how difficult and weird it was, where I was going to have dinner with the president at Mar-a-Lago. While literally flying there, they canceled the dinner. Then the day after, they added ADA to the reserve. Then we had an invitation to go to the White House, and then they rescinded the invitation. Then I moderated a panel with Don Jr. and moderated a panel with Eric Trump. So it's weird and it's a very chaotic thing, and I think that is a microcosm of a macro problem with how the Trump White House runs itself. But let's be clear, on the legislative side, we've had a constant, since actually September, discussion with many people in leadership about foundational things that need to happen for crypto to be successful in the United States. Because when the president says a mandate, we want America to be the best place to found, fund, and run a cryptocurrency business, he's not saying we want America to be the best place to run Ethereum businesses or Solana businesses or Bitcoin businesses, saying crypto businesses. So that has to be all the layer ones, that has to be the layer twos, that has to be the DApp and DeFi industry. And so if you think about legislation, it's multi-administration. The Securities Exchange Act of 1933 was passed 92 years ago, and we're still using its definition of an investment contract. So the Clarity Act, if it's written right, is going to transcend the Trump administration, and we're going to be talking about it for decades to come. So we got to get it written in a way that allows rulemaking to have enough dynamicism that it can evolve and change over time as technology changes. And the rulemaking will take about 2 to 3 years. So the executive branch went to the legislative branch. The legislative branch will do its job. Then it'll go back to the executive branch for rulemaking. We're going to be involved and have been involved on the legislative side. We've been heavily involved then when it gets back to the executive side at the administrative level. So that's going to be working groups between the SEC, the CFTC, hopefully NIST. We're really advocating strongly to get them involved because you need the science capacity and the engineering capacity to understand it. Also, you need it for government procurement. Like, how does the Department of Commerce or DoD or Secretary of State write an RFP for crypto if they don't have any definitions or
Right.
standards inside the United States? So we're just trying to be the adults in the room. What a lot of people have tried to do, Yano, for this is hijack the process for brand and optics and political. Yeah, I'm in the room. I was at the White House. I've done this thing. I'm a big guy. It's like,
Yeah,
okay,
everyone's got the $1 million
y
donation and
yeah,
then
I
the
know.
and then the
They
selfie and then
yeah, they all want that, but then it's like, guys, okay, great, you got a picture with the president, and great, you went to the White House, but you do understand that like we went from US trying to kill crypto to the US liking crypto, we could go back to trying to kill crypto. The delta between that is the administration. Administrations come and go. The thing that prevents that from happening is rulemaking and laws. So the nexus of power is Article 1 here. You have to get good legislation passed, and you have to get legislation that's dynamic enough that it's updatable at the rulemaking level so that we as an industry don't get stung with a scary Gary again. So that's been our constant focus for the last 7 months. And frankly, actually, a lot of the people that are writing these laws we've worked with since 2022.
mm,
We got early copies of the FIA from Senator Lummis and Gillibrand back when they were trying to pass it under the Biden administration. And so for over 3 years, we've been engaging with a lot of these people, whether it be Senator Scott or Lummis or others, and built relationships there. And what that's allowed us to do is to have an adult conversation about what needs to be in. Like, we really have to have a serious conversation about the definition of investment contract for it's been wrong since 1946. We really have to have a serious adult conversation about interagency rulemaking. And also, we have to create provisions to make sure that crypto can also be treated as a non-financial product. It can't be like Fit 21, where it's either commodity or security, and there's no difference between the two. That's like saying the internet can either be a chat app or email. It's like it's a lot of things, guys. So if you regulate the internet in 1992, maybe that would be your view
yeah.
of it. But so you can't just view crypto as a financial product. And the first few pieces of legislation, unfortunately, they were too much aligned on that. And our view was it would destroy innovation. You have to open it up for the industry as a whole, and it can't have statutory exemptions for specific blockchains. The first draft of the FIA actually had exemptions for Ethereum and Bitcoin, which made no sense. And so regardless of where the technology's at, what the technology does, if it's large or small, by law, they get special passes, and then everything else is under a test. It's like it should be one standard for everybody
Yeah.
in the entire cryptocurrency space.
Are you worried at all that the industry has gotten too in bed with the Republicans and that if things flip back and become more progressive or Democrats get back in power, that it's going to be really net negative for the industry?
Well, I mean, what more can the Democrats do? Biden took a position that everybody in the cryptocurrency space is a criminal. They shut our bank accounts down. They sued every US exchange. They said every cryptocurrency is a security. For Bitcoin, they tried to kill it with environmental policy. I mean, there was no safe harbor under the Democrats. So what are they going to do? Like double kill us? I mean, this is almost like the cadaver synod with Pope Formosus and Pope Stephen the Sixth. Like, Formosus was already dead when Stephen the Sixth put him on trial. So what are you going to do? Like, sentence the corpse to extra death? So what more can the Democrats do to us at this point? They were not pro crypto at all. So, and if the Democrats are like, well, you gotta be like nicer to us, or else, when we get back in power, we'll hurt you. No, the proper thing they should do is apologize for Gary Gensler. And the proper thing they should do is say, here's our strategy to be bipartisan and work together. And by the way, when you look at the Clarity Act and Genius Act, when it went to a vote, it wasn't party line. There were Democrats who voted for it. So there, especially amongst younger Democrats who aren't beholden to the Warren part of the party, they really do feel like this technology is intrinsically bipartisan. And you got to understand that a lot of the people who are billionaires and powerful in the cryptocurrency space, they're young and politically liberal. So the crazy part of all of this, when you remove the miasma of the Trump administration, is that half or more of these people who got rich from crypto will be donors for the left. And so when you start talking on a bipartisan basis, you're like, look, widen the aperture and think about a life after the drama and chaos of all this stuff. Do you want 25 more billionaire donors or not? Do you want half of America, because there's 50 some million Americans that hold crypto. Most of them are young, so politically probably the majority of them are liberal. Do you want to take money out of the pockets of people that normally vote for you, or do you want to put money in the pockets
Mm,
of people that vote for you? When you start having that conversation, they do the math and the numbers, they're like, "Shit, yeah, we gotta get behind crypto." Just some things have come up that have been horrifically counterproductive to the process. Trump
yeah.
coin was horrifically counterproductive, and, Trump's business interests in crypto have been counterproductive. They Had I been an advisor, I would have said, like, "I'm not telling you not to do these things, but why don't you wait until after the legislation's been passed and we're in the rulemaking phase to launch your projects, and launch them under the new frameworks." So then everybody's following the same rules.
Yeah.
Problem now is that it's reduced the entire dialogue to crypto equals Trump equals bad amongst some people on the left, and, especially the politically elite inside America.
Yeah.
And it's just sad because we actually in December were in a very bipartisan spot. A lot of people post Harris realized one of the reasons they lost the election was because of crypto. It moved several million votes, and so they were prepared to embrace crypto fully. And we were looking at a very bipartisan program. It's still bipartisan, but it's light bipartisan now,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And you're absolutely right to point out that if we continue to go down this road, it will become a wedge issue, just like abortion, for example, is a wedge issue between the
Yeah. I,
Republicans.
I actually I do agree with that. Um, Charles, what do you think of these crypto treasury vehicles or digital asset vehicle, whatever we want to call them?
I got a
What do you,
banker every fucking day reaching out to
every
me
day,
saying, "Let's
right? Every day, yeah.
let's do something with it." They want me to
Why
start
don't
one.
you do something?
I probably will.
Yeah.
I learn by doing, and so I'll reserve comment until I actually start something, and then I'll be like, "Yeah, it's the best thing since sliced bread."
Yeah. Yeah, that's how it goes.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I mean on those or like I guess adjacent to that, you guys have I was trying to find out how much was in your treasury, but you guys have something like 1.25 billion in your
Yeah.
treasury, I
Depends
think.
on the price of ADA. It's about 1.8 billion ADA, and so it's like 1.2 billion or something like that dollars.
$1.2 billion dollars in your treasury.
Yeah, on-chain treasury, not our treasury, but the Cardano
The
itself, right?
Cardano trade, yeah, yeah. I mean, I saw a video, I think it was maybe a month or 2 ago from an interview where you were proposing converting some of the ADA into Bitcoin and stablecoins, and then using yield to buy back ADA, from what I can kind of
Yeah.
understand. But
Yeah.
how
Thank
do
you
you
for
think about just
representing
like
it accurately. So I the minute I said it, then all these maxis came out and said, "Charles is dumping all of his ADA for Bitcoin." I was like, "Jesus fucking
yeah, that's
Christ."
how it goes. That's how
Yeah,
it
just
goes.
how it goes, man. So here's the thing, the Cardano treasury is an on-chain treasury, so it is passive, non-yield bearing, and single asset, and unmanaged, just ADA. So the suggestion was to create a governance vehicle where, basically we could have a treasury that is managed multi-asset and yield bearing. And then the community could decide on an annual basis of how much they want to live in bucket A and how much they want to live in bucket B. And for the stuff that's managed, when it makes a yield, have that yield by ADA and send it back to bucket A. And so the amounts are immaterial, but it's more of a question philosophically: do we want to upgrade our treasury vehicle to have some management layer, and then it has to be a governance structure to handle that. Usually a board of governors, and then an administrator, and then some form of financial an advisor that does the actual deployment of the capital. Now, the primary problem I want to solve is that the stablecoin issuance of Cardano is very soft, and so it would be nice to get 25 to $50 million of stablecoins minted through this vehicle every year so that we can kind of build that up. The other thing is Bitcoin DeFi, we have prime the pump. So it would be nice to put 50 million to $100 million worth of Bitcoin and show on Cardano, Bitcoin can get a Bitcoin yield.
Yeah.
Then that can create a channel for more Bitcoin to come into Cardano, and we can use it to seed up, kind of like when you're growing a crystal, you have a seed to grow the crystal. So similarly, you put the first 50 million in to grow that up. So that was the idea. But what's nice is as ADA grows, the treasury can grow, and then it becomes like a sovereign wealth fund, and it generates a passive return for the ecosystem as a whole. And then the ecosystem can, if they don't want to do anything with it, just buy ADA with it and send it back, like you would with a sovereign fund, or it can deploy that capital in more intelligent ways. Like it could, for example, take equity positions in key projects or blockchain to blockchain partnerships. Like let's say maybe we make a deal with XRP, so the treasury actually buys some XRP as an example. So it shows now the Cardano ecosystem is a
Yeah.
holder in that.
Why don't okay, if you extend this far enough on the, let's say there's a spectrum here, why don't you just go the EOS strategy and just convert all your, I mean, I think Block 1 is the fourth or third largest holder of Bitcoin in the entire world. Like, why not just go all the way, sell all the ADA, buy Bitcoin. You're then like a top 5 Bitcoin holder in the world, and then you can do a bunch of good with that money.
Because ADA is a significantly better investment than Bitcoin. It's not
Mhm.
me saying it's a fact. So here's some history that you might not be aware of. When the ADA crowd sale happened, we did it in yen, and the yen was converted to Bitcoin for auditability. So an audit report's actually coming out likely next month. It'll show the Bitcoin addresses for this. But at one time, I was one of the largest holders of Bitcoin in the world. We had 108,000 Bitcoin. So, that's a lot of Bitcoin, but it was at $250, give or take, depending on when it was purchased, because there were several tranches for it. Well, here's the thing, if you do the market valuation of that, this is like what, 12, 13 billion, depends on the Bitcoin value of the
12
day.
billion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 13.
Well, if we just held the Bitcoin from the ADA sale, it'd be 12 billion. The market value of Cardano is 30 billion. So we outperformed Bitcoin by a factor of 2.8, give or take. So people are like, "Oh, Bitcoin is such a better investment than all these other things." Well, EOS, absolutely, that's true. The only 2 around from that era are Ethereum and Cardano, where actually the networks substantially outperformed Bitcoin, in this case by almost
Wait,
300%.
what are the 2? Cardano and what's the other one you
And
said?
Ethereum,
And Ethereum, yeah.
those are the only 2. So
Do
so
you
that's just the fact, so why is it, "Oh, why don't you just convert all your ADA to Bitcoin?" It's like, "Okay, so we can make less money, as an
you thi you
ecosystem."
think you think ADA will still outperform BTC in the
Of
future?
course, because how much farther can Bitcoin go? Maybe to 1,000,000, okay, it's a 10x. ADA can go 100x, 1,000x, over this. It's like, guys, we're not a second-class citizen. Cardano does substantially more, and because of Bitcoin DeFi, it's gonna end up probably being the yield layer of Bitcoin, and so it's gonna get a huge halo effect from that, and because of the launch model of Midnight, partner chains are gonna bring in airdrops almost annually to ADA. So you're like making the case for holding ADA. It's like if you hold ADA, you're going to get Night tokens. Night could be a $10 billion product right out of the gate. And 50% of the supply is being allocated to ADA holders. And
Mm.
every year, these things are going to be dropping.
What
And when you hold
when does that airdrop happen?
the airdrop is the second half of the year. We'll have an announcement at Rare Evo about it.
Mm,
But that's like imminent. It's not like a
yeah.
hypothetical thing. It's like
Yeah,
this
yeah.
year and Midnight's launching this year. And every year, these drops are coming. And when you hold ADA, you're going to get multiple revenue streams. You get the ADA yield, but then you also get all the other tokens that are managed inside the ecosystem. So, I mean, if you look at the technology, the growth of the technology, the growth of the community, where we're at in the product life cycle relative to Bitcoin, you also take a look at all the upside that can come. It's probably a 10x to 100x difference between what's potentially possible for ADA over Bitcoin. So why was there a suggestion to convert some ADA to Bitcoin? It's a good asset to hold, but more importantly, it primes the Bitcoin DeFi pump. That was the suggestion there. But
Mm.
here's another thing people don't get about our TVL. Once yield products and lending products come on Cardano, our TVL is probably going to be over $10 billion instantly from that, because 50% or more of the ADA supply is in Japan. That's about $15 billion worth of ADA. Okay?
Wait, 50% of the ADA supply is in
Japan.
the because the
Because
Japanese owners, so
they
ADA
never sold
people.
it. They never sold it. They bought it back in 2015,
Okay,
2014,
let me ask you this. So I was talking to people before this episode being like, "All right," like, a bunch of, like, OG friends and stuff. I was like, "What
Yep.
should I ask Charles?" And he's like, I'm, we can see where you want to take this question, but they were like, you should ask him about the original founding of Cardano in Japan with like the 4 families or the 4 banks. And I was like, what are you talking about? They're like, Charles will know what you're talking about. So where do I don't know how you would take that
I
answer, but
I mean, so we actually had one of the most decentralized distributions in the history of cryptocurrency, and we actually have the only one that had provable people. So the entire crowd sale was basically in Japan. Everybody who bought, they bought usually with yen, so they went from not from crypto, but from fiat into crypto. So it brought a lot of new people into the space, and there were 9,900 and some Japanese people that participated, and they all went through KYC. So we
it was only
actually had
Japan.
There's Japan and a little bit in Korea, but
Interesting. Why
99%.
Japan? Why'd you do Japan?
Because the people when I just did Ethereum, and some people in Japan reached out to me and said, "We wanna do the Ethereum of Japan," and I'd been pushed out of Ethereum, so I had this unused roadmap for Ethereum.
Got it. Okay, this is what I was trying to understand with a friend of mine who was, kind of early Ethereum world as well. He was saying someone else had the kind of idea for Ethereum of Japan or Ethereum of Asia or something, and then they reached out to Charles to run it.
Well, yeah, I had the entire roadmap and all the technical stuff, but the thing is they had the market access, so we partnered The
Got
people
it.
who had the market access became Emergo, which is a sister company, and, I created input output out of it, and so we did the protocol engineering and the product philosophy and these things, and kind of the design of Cardano, and then they did the initial distribution and took care of that side of the house. So basically, almost 10,000 people bought it. It was all in Japan. They bought vouchers and, raised about $60 million. It was converted into Bitcoin, and that was 108,000 Bitcoin, and then it financed the project throughout its entire life cycle. And what was really cool is like the Japanese buy and hold and they just never sell. So like 50% or more is still sitting in Japan. So that's about
Yeah.
$15 billion. And they sell, they get a 55% tax rate. So here's why it's going to supercharge
Oh,
DeFi.
so they just never sell because of the tax rate
Yeah,
so
they
high
just
on
hold
crypto.
it. So, but they're not
Interesting.
taxed on those. But basically, if you make a yield product out of it, where they lend their ADA, create a stable
Yeah, of
coin, and
course.
then do that, then they're not selling, right? So once those DeFi markets turn on and the Japanese decide to do that, like instantly the TVL goes to like
Is
15
that the
billion.
dynamic with some of these other, like, this they're I don't know how you feel about this term, but, like, dino coins, like, there's when the market really pumps, like, you guys pump, Ripple pumps, Hedera pumps, Algorand
Yeah.
pumps, like, is that because a lot of the holders are in Asia where the tax rate is actually a lot higher?
It depends on the dynamics, but Cardano has the largest Asian ownership part,
Interesting.
and
Who's the guy who reached out to you in the first place? Is it like a big, very wealthy Japanese guy?
no, 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 actually, it's crazy. My secretary that I had when I was at Ethereum was Jeremy Wood, and he lived in Osaka, Japan, and he played poker with a random guy who was like a crypto investor, and he wasn't even a big crypto investor, he was like a mid-sized crypto investor in Japan who'd made some money off of XRP and Bitcoin, and he's like, "I really like what you guys did with Ethereum, that's so cool," and, I have some friends we probably could set up, and everybody's fundraising this particular way, we probably could figure out how to raise some money if you guys wanna do like an Ethereum of Japan. So my ex-secretary called me and he's like, "Do you wanna come to Japan and talk to this guy?" And I was like, "Oh, man, Imma leave crypto. I'm 0 and 2, I'm having a bad fuck it, I'll go. I need a distraction." So I flew out, and I spent a week
Huh.
with these guys, and they were like, "Yeah, this sounds like a lot of fun. Let's go for it." And, I had the whole Ethereum plan already written down. I was really excited about it. I had this formal methods things and UTXO, and we knew how to do the proof of stake and the other stuff, and basically started from scratch and had to build new companies and a foundation and all this other stuff. And it was an enormous amount of work, and
Hmm.
nobody cared about it at all until we launched in 2017. And then when we launched, it immediately went to the top 10 and it never left, for any substantial period of time. And we outlined the roadmap. We said we're going to start as a static federated system and then grow to a dynamic and decentralized, and then add smart contracts and add governance and then add scalability inside the system. So we're
Mm.
10 years into it and we're nearly done with the entire original roadmap. And we're in a really strong position because it's become this incredible project. And what's ironic is the Japanese are kind of running the system now. They all the
That's
DREP
great.
power is in their hands, and we have an on-chain constitution, and they elect people now. The largest DREP is a Japanese guy named Yuta. So
Ah,
they're and Japan didn't really like the way that things were done initially, but then, what happened is that once it became the largest Japanese cryptocurrency, they're like, "Yeah, Cardano was made in Japan. It's our thing." It's like, yeah, we run that. In Japan, you just have to live long enough so they forget why they hate you, and then they accept you gradually. But it was
yeah.
a wild time. I got to see the whole country. I lived in Osaka for a bit. I started in Hokkaido, went all the way down
I
to
didn't know this.
the
That's
south.
cool.
And we have a lot of lifelong friends there, and there's just a lot of power in that base. But you got to understand, Japan is like its own planet, and so it's not connected to Silicon Valley. It's not connected to the U.S. media. So that's why that phrase "big in Japan" is such a thing because they're so far apart that when things happen in Japan, people in the U.S. tend to ignore it unless they make an action to move it into the United States. So it was both a blessing and a curse. It was a blessing because we were insulated and we could grow in our own way. And also because the financing was done as a Reg S and it's offshore, it had a very different character than let's say Solana did or Ethereum did or EOS
Right.
did. But it also the other issue was that Silicon Valley mostly ignored it, and a lot of people mostly ignored it, and they weren't really sure like where's the nexus of the success from. So it must just be like everybody loves Charles and he's a great cult leader and he just pushed these things along, not realizing there's millions of people in the community and they actually do care about it and they invest in it and build it up and there's a lot of
Yeah.
activity. It's just in a very non-traditional way.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I'm trying to think of, the appropriate way to ask this question, but how do you manage your personal money, Charles?
Well, there's a big crypto component to it, and then there's a lot of private wealth management, so all the usual private wealth suspects, and, you create a diversified portfolio, of these
Like, are
things.
you mostly out of like, I mean, you obviously, Cardano's FDV is 37 billion today. I don't know
Yeah.
what percentage you owned. Let's make it up and call it 10%. So then that's roughly a $4 billion to you. I also have one of my friends was like, yeah, at one point I think Charles owned about 50,000 Bitcoin, which is, let's call it $6 billion. So
I'm doing good, Yano.
yeah. What do you do? I want to maybe segue into some of the fun stuff you do with your money. Um, there's we can go anywhere where we want with this. I've got a story. Someone texted me about buying a Blackhawk for about 10 million. I've got someone else who said you own more buffalo than anyone in the world.
That's not
And
true. I only own about a few hundred of them. Ted Turner's ranch has got, like, 500,000 or something
that's what I
crazy.
said. I said I
Yeah.
thought Ted Turner owned more than that. Um, and John Malone too, I think owns a lot of them, or a lot of
Yeah.
land at least. And then you've got an alien tech expedition. So tell me about some of these stories, man. Like how do you get into this? There's a lot of billionaires out there who are not doing these interesting, trying to find aliens and buying Blackhawks. So
Well, I mean, they probably do, but they're just less public, about all these things. And
yeah.
I'm a very public guy because I'm kind of the new generation of billionaire, and so we're all out there, and everything goes on Twitter. So, with respect to Blackhawk, what happened was that I have a ranch and a farm, and also I have a clinic. And so the clinic's in Gillette, the farm is in Boulder, and the ranch is in Wheatland. So it takes about 3 hours to drive to the ranch. It takes about 5 hours to drive to Gillette. So I got really tired of driving, back and forth, and I said it'd probably make a lot more sense by helicopter. But then when I started thinking about helicopters, I said, well, if I'm gonna do it, because we have a lot of heavy industry stuff and also wildfires, it would be nice to buy a helicopter that can also do heavy stuff like heavy lifting and fence building and ranch work, but then also can be used to treat
Mm,
wildfires. So then we
mm,
started looking at all these different things, and I also have private security detail, and I wanted something that potentially could be used in training missions with these guys, or if we want to do humanitarian stuff. Like I sent my helicopter, for example, to North Carolina after Hurricane Helena happened. We worked with Samaritan's Purse, and we had Don Jr. on the helicopter, and we worked with Billy Graham's grandson, and we delivered generators to people, and all kinds of things. In fact, right there, that story, Wyoming man donated Black Hawk helicopter to Hurricane Helena disaster in the Cowboy State Daily. That's a picture of the helicopter. So when we put all the mission profiles, and those are my pilots, when we put all the mission profiles together, it came down to Black Hawk is the way to go. The problem was that the FAA wasn't really enamored with the idea of a civilian, doing it for all these profiles. So it took a little while to kind of figure out a package that they would be comfortable with. And then what I ended up doing is I upgraded the helicopter substantially. So that's an alpha model. And what I did is I added a Lima engine with, so the Alpha models came out in the 80s, the Limas were in the 90s, the Mike model were the 2000s. So I added a Lima engine and transmission to it, and then we upgraded the interior a little bit, but it's still retro, and we even have a fries bar with it, so you can jump out of it, you can fast rope out of it, you can do all the military special ops stuff because I have my security details almost all special forces operators, and so we still train them just like they would SOCOM. That's why we have the Sean Ryan relationship and, all these other things. But I love it, and I learned an enormous amount about rotary wing assets and aviation, and, we just had a tremendous amount of fun kind of figuring out the art of the possible, and at some point, actually, I'd like to start manufacturing them because, I'm a big fan of the Black Hawk as a platform, but it's getting long in the tooth. It's over 40 years old, and so I came up with a lot of ideas to kinda do new material sciences to build this up. What you'll find with my passions is that I don't just buy stuff for the sake of buying stuff. It's usually I want to blend it with some part utility, some part humanitarian, some part preservation of history and provenance, and then some part innovation. So, like my ranch, for example, Teddy Roosevelt used to own part of it. And I'm actually writing a book with Mark Jung, and that'll be published on Book.io. So, I'm doing like a book on my blockchain about the history of my ranch with a historian in Wyoming,
hmm,
and now I get to run a ranch, and so then I get to learn about ranching, and then I'm starting to think about the innovation of ranching and, like, how do we take ranching to the next level? So I'm, like, remediating the soil from many years of misuse from prior owners,
hmm,
and then I'm also thinking about, like, next generation ways of feeding my bison using, hydroponically grown fodder, there's all these cool things that you get to do with the new technology, but then you get to use old stuff too, and you want to preserve that. The Black Hawk is part of history. Like every American conflict that we've had since the 80s, the Black Hawk has been there. That particular one fought in the Gulf War. And so by having that, you're also now part of that history of GWAT and prior conflicts. And then you kind of get to keep it going and keep that legacy going. But then it makes you think about what would be a better Black Hawk, and how could I build something like that, and with modern material sciences and these things. And that's one of my big interests. And so I'd love to be able to eventually do that and take it to the next level, like with an electromagnetic rotor system, and make it hydrogen powered or battery
Huh.
powered, as opposed to be on JP8. And then also make it a lot lighter, and so you can put more armor on it, and then put drones in it and all these other things. Because if you make it electric motors, take out the transmission and the engines, you'll save an enormous amount of weight. So there's all kinds of things I think about. The tail, for example, is an open tail design. I'd love to do a dual fenestron design inside the tail. So I don't just buy these for fun. I buy them because I'm interested in them, and there's something I want to do with them.
Mantle is pioneering the blockchain for banking, a bold new category combining traditional finance with the power of Web3. With UR, the world's first on-chain money app, users can manage fiat and crypto side by side using a Swiss IBAN account in Euro, US dollar, Swiss franc, and RMB, all posted to the blockchain. Backed by the Mantle network, UR is the access layer that unlocks a purpose-built vertical platform for on-chain payments, trading, and asset protocols, including METH, MI4, and functions FBTC. All economic activity within UR will be captured by Mantle Network to further drive value to MNT token holders. Follow Mantle on X at Mantle_official for more. Ever wish you could access cash without selling your Bitcoin? LEDN, the global leader in Bitcoin-backed lending, makes that possible. Since 2018, they've issued over $9 billion in loans, and not a single Satoshi of client funds has ever been lost. Here's what makes a LEDN loan different. With custodied loans, collateral is not lent out to generate interest. No credit checks, funds in less than 12 hours, and no monthly payments. Repay whenever you want with zero penalties, and they don't just talk security, they prove it. LEDN offers proof of reserves reports verified by a top accounting firm every 6 months. LEDN is 100% focused on doing one thing better than anyone else, giving Bitcoin holders a secure, transparent way to unlock liquidity without selling. Click the link in the show notes to find out more. As always, investments in blockchain technology involve risk, terms, and conditions apply. Tell me about the bison. So I think this is a picture. This is a real picture, right? This is actually your bison?
Yep.
And then this is
That's my
your
ranch.
bison. That's your ranch. This
Yeah.
is not a real picture, right?
No. That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's actually a very famous buffalo, lives up in Canada. He's dead now. That was Bailey the bison. And the guy who owned him raised him from a calf, and that was the only houselo. So that was a house buffalo. And actually he even modified he had a Cadillac, and he modified his car so he could drive the bison to a local bar, and the bison would come to the
That's
bar and drink beer out of a bucket.
that's ridiculous. That's
Yeah.
ridiculous. I love that though. How many bison do you have?
So I used to have 800, but we had to cull the herd a little bit, and so we took it down to a few hundred, and we'll build it back up. Uh, we had some issues because we do guided hunts every year for the ranch, and we had some issues with one of the years where we didn't have enough sales because one of our people wasn't calling people back, and the head of bison ops had some health problems, and so I wasn't watching it closely. And bison breed pretty quickly, and so suddenly the herd just grew too quickly, and we had to pare it down. It was getting pretty ridiculous.
800 bison.
They were everywhere. Like I would pull up my ranch house, and it'd be like bison sitting in my front yard. I'm like, "Hey, get out,
You're
get
you're
out."
in you're in Wyoming, is that right?
Yeah, half the time in Wyoming, and then half the time Colorado.
Yeah. Wow. Where are the bison?
In Wyoming at the
In
ranch.
Wyoming. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice. And what about this alien tech expedition?
So that was with Avi Loeb. So if you Google like Charles Hoskinson, Avi Loeb spherules, you can kind of bring up the spherules, and you can see them because it's better to just kind of look at them.
Which thing should I click
It's
here?
Avi Loeb, not
Oh,
Loeb,
lobe.
Lobe, and spherules. So up there at the Google search spherules. Well, sure, why not? Scroll down, they probably have a picture inside this article. That article right there that you were just in. Oh, good. This is going to tell the whole story. Yeah, that's one of the spherules. Keep going. And that's where they tested them. And there should be a beautiful picture of the gold ones. That's us on the sled. Okay, so yeah, this is a pretty good visual story. So basically, what happened was that Avi, I've known Avi for a while, and I called him up after he was talking about Oumuamua, and oh, that's such a beautiful picture too. I'll tell you about that guy on the left. He's a fucking legend. That's art, right? He's like this old dude. He's 89 in that picture. So basically, I called Avi up, and I'm like, Avi, I really want to, I was thinking about Oumuamua. It'd be really fun to do something with you guys. And he's like, hey, I'm looking for some funding to go and recover a meteor that crashed on the Earth in 2014. That's from a different solar system. And yeah, right there, those are the spherules. So basically, what happened was that in 2014, this thing from a different planet came into our solar system and it crashed on Earth, and nobody knew what the hell it was. So it could be alien space junk, it could be an asteroid, it could be from a core of a planet. Nobody knew, but it had a very strong material strength. It was going way too fast, and it wasn't from our solar system. And that's a very, very rare thing. It's like winning the lottery 3 times in a row. So we had to haggle with the Air Force for a while because they knew where it was at, but they wouldn't tell us because they used spy satellites to find it. So we had to haggle with them for a while to give us some rough coordinates. And then we basically created this search box. And what we did is we retrofitted a ship with Rob McCallum, and he's like a famous sea salvage guy. And Rob basically is the guy went down with James Cameron for the Titanic, and he was with Bezos when he recovered the Saturn V boosters and all these other things. So he's like a billionaire's play guy. Like, you want to go to space, you talk to Rob, or you want to go like find something on the seafloor, he's your guy. So we talked to Rob, and we basically designed an expedition with Rob. And then on the science side, if you click on that picture just to the left of the spheral, where there's like this sled, oh, to the right of it, sorry. Where, yeah, right there is fine. Or the more interesting one with just right there, yeah. So that sled right there is something we designed. It has magnets embedded inside of it, and what we would do is drop it behind the ship, 6,000 feet underwater, so over a mile underwater, and we drag that sled on the sea floor for 8 hours. We'd bring it up, and then we'd scrape off the magnets, whatever it found, and then we would be looking for a needle in the haystack. So we actually found fragments of the meteorite that came and hit the Earth, and that's what those little gold orbs are to the left. Those are spherules that
So
we
so
recovered.
this is the gold. So you found this
We
using
found
this
that.
magnet,
Yeah, we found it using that
and
sled.
what was it? What is it?
So it's really interesting. We wrote a paper on it, and basically the paper analyzed it. So they took it back to Harvard, and the astrogeology department discovered that those spheres have 1 to 5,000 times more beryllium, lanthanum, and uranium than anything in the solar system for background materials. So basically, what we think happened was that something collided with a planet in a different solar system long time ago. The planet spilled open, and then for a billion years, the core traveled through space, and then it hit our planet. So we basically found those needles in a haystack, and it was just an extraordinarily difficult thing to do. And like, just think about
This
how
is nuts,
crazy that
man.
is.
This is
Yeah.
this is
It
crazy.
it was so much fun. We had to learn a lot. I was on the ship for 2 weeks. It was a catamaran, so it was doing this the entire time, and, and seasickness. Yeah, we had to put the scopolamine patches on to prevent seasickness, but the problem is you
Yeah.
leave them on too long, you start hallucinating. So you're like, "Do I wanna hallucinate and have crazy ass dreams, or do I wanna throw up?" I mean, like, what these are my 2 options here on this expedition. But it was great. I learned an enormous amount about sea salvage. I learned an enormous amount about astrogeology, and it was just a lot of fun to work with Avi. And actually, the guy that was in that beautiful picture with the sunset was Art Wright, and we pulled him out of retirement just for this. But he was the Navy's top sea salvage guy, and he actually used to work to find clearance stuff. So, like when a Russian nuclear sub would, you know, blow up and fall to the sea floor. Art was the guy the Navy would bring in to go and find that. So he was like a crusty old sea captain who was 89 years old, and he was our navigator. And he was navigating the entire time with a piece of graph paper in his front pocket. So every morning I'd have coffee with him at like 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd say, "Morning, Captain." And he was a salty guy. Like, he was a rowing champion at 89. And so I was like, "How do you become a rowing champion at 89?" He's like, "Everyone else died." So I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that kind of does make sense." But he was a brilliant guy, and he knew more in his left shoe about, being a sea captain than pretty much anybody I've ever met. But
Wow.
it was just a crew of characters, man. It was a lot of fun.
How much did you pay to fund this? You funded
Uh,
this, right?
yeah, I funded the whole thing. It was only about 1.5 million, so it was very
Yeah.
small. And actually, there was a Netflix crew there. They documented the whole thing, and the guy who did it is a famous director, but he hasn't released it yet. It's been like
Hmm.
2 years, and we keep
Hmm.
calling him. We're like, "When is that coming on Netflix? I
Yeah.
wanna show people," 'cause they were all in our face, like cameras everywhere, and we had these dramatic flybys with my jet where they were recording the search area, and I even kinda got into it, like, I posted a tweet with, like, the thing when we're bringing up the sled and had the background track for the thing. We're like, "Hey," because we always were like, "Hey, is there really gonna be alien stuff?" Because it technically could be alien stuff, you never know. But it wasn't. It was,
Do you just we're kind of going all over the place, but that's fine. Do you have security problems being so public and wealthy?
Yeah, there's been some issues, and I have a full detail, and they take care of me, and everybody sees me these days. They kind of see the guys around me, but you can see all the news stories. Like there was an Australian crypto billionaire that bit off the finger of a
No,
person who
yeah,
tried.
this dinner I was at
Yeah,
last night, everyone like the main topic was basically security.
yeah.
And
And I kinda predicted this was gonna be an issue, so I built the detail back in 21 before it was a big deal, and I lived with the detail, built up the detail, and trained them, and, got them integrated into the home life, so they protect the property and they protect me, and I
wow.
learned an enormous amount about running an executive protection company to an extent where we may even start offering it as a service to other family offices, and what's nice is they're all special forces guys, so they're Green Berets and Rangers and SEAL Team 6 people, and so they're just super smart about running operations, and they do advances and this and that. And so what's nice about those processes and procedures is that it's the same type of package that Secret Service would have for an ultra VIP, and actually makes it very easy to deal with other ultra VIPs because we understand security, we understand their security needs. So if I meet with
Mm,
somebody who's like a head of state, or we have like an ultra wealthy person or a celebrity come over, their detail talks to my detail, and they handle all the travel and coordination, logistics,
mm,
and everything's just easy. Like, we met with Robert Kennedy when he was on the campaign trail, and Gavin DeBecker did the security package for Kennedy because they were good friends. So we just talked to Gavin DeBecker, and we're like, "Hey, how do you guys wanna meet up and do this?" Or like when we met with Eric Trump, there was a Secret Service coordination, these types of things.
yeah,
The other cool part is you just get to hang out with all these special forces guys, and they have amazing stories, and they've done all these crazy things, and so you learn a lot from it, and that special forces culture, the tempo that they operate at is just incredible. And I
yeah.
travel 200 to 250 days a year. I've been to 75 countries. So I have kind of an operator's tempo. So having those guys roll,
Mm,
they actually can keep up with the enormous demand. And we're working 12, 16-hour days. We're meeting dozens of people. There's a lot of pre-vetting we do for meetings. So I get, dossiers every time I meet with a person. And so I can kind of get an understanding of what their background is, where they come from, the political connections and other things. Because we meet with lots of heads of state, and some are good people and some are kind of mixed bags. And so it's really important to have a pretty good understanding of what you're getting yourself into, and these relationships and connections. And it keeps you out of a ton of trouble. A lot of crypto people, they just seem to think that they can live the same way that they lived before they got rich. And it's like, well, more money, more problems, man. And so when you get rich, unfortunately, then there's extortion rackets and sometimes undesirable people that come. They try to latch onto you to take things. And kidnapping
yeah,
is the big one right now, especially in France, where multiple people have been
yeah,
kidnapped. Like a friend of mine got kidnapped, a co-founder of Ledger, and they cut his finger off.
yeah,
And so it's just crazy, what these people are doing, and that was a premeditated thing where they followed him for his pattern of life, and they broke it and took him and his wife, and it's a bad deal. And so now all these crypto people are like, "Well, we need to do security," and it's like, "Well, duh," just like Cardano, I've been ahead of you for a few years, and we did it in a peer-reviewed way. We went to the best of the best in the military, and a lot of these guys did like embassy protection packages or ultra VIP packages for generals and things like that. So they have a pretty good understanding of what's necessary for security, and it's just good to have them around. Plus, they never say no, no matter how dangerous it is.
Let's get back into this cycle. One thing I want to get your take on that I feel like is not there's a lot of disagreement is do we still have 4-year cycles, right? And since you've been in the industry, the industry has run on the market cycles have run in these 4-year cycles, obviously. I'm curious if you think the 4-year cycle is still intact.
No, it's a different cycle. It's something different going on, and I don't even think we're close to the peak of the bull market. People have gotten so pessimistic and cynical that they're like, "Oh, the market's dead, and we've ballooned." It's like, dude, clarity's not even passed yet. When clarity gets passed, the Mag 7 are gonna enter the cryptocurrency space. You're gonna have stable coins go above 1 to 2 trillion in issuance. You're gonna have real world assets come in. The total market cap aggregate is gonna be over 10 trillion. And so I call this the Giga Chad bull run. It's like the biggest bull run we've ever had. And when Bitcoin starts stalling, then the alts will pop. And so you're going to see great ratios that come from this whole thing. And yeah, it'll die off a little bit, but it's like every time you have these windows, you go to new all time highs, and then you stay at new all time lows. And so it's no longer a 4 year cycle because it's not retail led anymore. It's more led by institutions, and it's more led by massive investors, but simply put, there's just too much going on. The inventories on Bitcoin are too low. You got these DATs injecting gargantuan amounts of money into the market, and there's no way not to see a bull run, from all
When
of
do you
this.
think we hit wait, so what are we at today? 4 trillion, I think?
Yeah,
Yeah, we're at 4 trillion. When do you think we hit 10 trillion?
before the end of the cycle, and I think the cycle will last throughout 2026 because
Yeah.
clarity is gonna be the catalyst, I think, that really bootstraps it up. And the only reason why we haven't super taken off was that there was an irrational exuberance when Trump got elected, and then it didn't immediately pay off, and so people got a little crazy about it. And then the tariffs and all the macroeconomic stuff kind of shook the market a little bit. But people are starting to look at crypto as a counter-cyclic and a as a hedge asset to the collapse of the U.S. dollar, or to inflation, or there's such things. So we'll get where we need to go, as an industry and a market, and especially when the fourth generations come in and they bring in all the real world assets, because then suddenly you have all these yield products that come in that give 10%, 20%, whether it be launch insurance, for rockets, or exotic microfinance plays, or whatever the hell it is. They'll come in, and then it'll just tract a ton of money, and the Mag
What do you
7 can
think
come in.
Yeah,
You know,
what do you think Cardano okay, so Cardano in 2017 ripped from, like, what, a cent to, like, a dollar, let's call
yep.
it? And then the last cycle, you guys ripped again from 5 cents to $3. Um, Bottom of this cycle, you guys were at 25 cents. You're at, like, 82 cents today.
Yep.
What does Cardano hit if, crypto as a market cap is at 10 trillion?
It's hard to say. It'll be a ratio, but I don't think it's unreasonable to believe that there's a path to recover the all-time high that we enjoyed. But it's hard to say because there's a lot of factors that come into play. So that's why I tend to look at the macro of the industry as a whole. Like, do I believe the vertical is going to go from 4 to 10? Yes. Do I believe there's enormous amounts of new capital entering the market? Yes. And I do believe Cardano is well positioned to receive a fair share of that, especially with value leakage from Bitcoin. Because once Bitcoin stalls, because it always happens at some point, it's going to reach some ceiling, like 250,000 or 500,000. Then the game is no longer buy and hold appreciation. It's now just
Mm,
make yield with what you have. So when you flip that switch and you go into Bitcoin DeFi, you will have a 2.5 trillion. If it goes to 250, about $4 trillion market where 10% flows into other cryptocurrencies. So
yeah.
that's $400 billion, which is gonna flow into other cryptocurrencies to seeking yield. You
Yeah, I tend to agree with that.
so it doesn't matter if it's 1% or 5% or 10%. These are big fucking numbers, man, when you talk about the yield side of the game. And so that's why I always widen the aperture and look at these things. So I'm a protocol architect guy. And so I say, all right, well, what capabilities does Cardano need to have in terms of its ecosystem, its technology, its market position to be able to absorb this halo? And we're moving very quickly as an ecosystem to do that. And we have a lot of built-in advantages, from the hard fork combinator to UTXO and other things that kind of allow us as an ecosystem to move there, and we're rallying the base as hard as we can in anticipation of the Giga Chat will run.
Um, Speaking of being a protocol architect, someone sent me something, or maybe our producer wrote this down, but I haven't actually read any information on it, so I'm not sure where we're going with this question. But they said you've hinted psychedelics has shaped how you designed consensus. Um, I've done no research on that question, but what are your thoughts on just psychedelics in general?
Well, no, I didn't take a bunch of mushrooms and then come up with Ouroboros or anything like
That would
that.
have
No,
led
we
to a really good short clip for Twitter, though,
Oh, it
Charles.
would've been great. So I because I do healthcare, as one of our core businesses. Mental health is something we are very concerned about, and so we do look at using ketamine and transcranial magnetic stimulation for depression treatment. We
Yeah,
actually already,
ketamine for depression has amazing results. Yeah.
especially when you combine it with other modalities like TMS. So actually,
Yeah.
TMS is one of my favorite things, and not a lot of people know about it, but it's been around for a while and it's FDA approved. So transcranial magnetic stimulation is literally where you map the brain and they use magnets on the brain to basically break synapses and rebuild them and structurally rebuild the brain to rewire the depressed circuits inside the brain to be not depressed anymore. And so where and when it works about one third to half the time, and people like their depression goes in remission and they get off drugs. And what's really crazy about it is that in many cases they're durable gains, and they have one protocol with TMS that only takes 5 days. So you can be super fucking depressed. We nuke your brain with magnets for a little while. 5 days later, you come out and you're like, "Wow, life is great. I feel better again." We are starting a study where we're gonna combine TMS with ketamine and functional MRI mapping. So we get a really detailed brain map using very sophisticated research MRI because we have a 3 Tesla research MRI at my clinic, and we use
Mhm.
AI upscaling with it. And we're gonna combine those modalities together, and we think that we'll be able to create a durable protocol that cures depression or at least pushes it into remission 50% of the time. You flip a quarter, your depression's gone. We can do it in 5 days using ketamine.
Mhm.
So which is just crazy. But that's just one entry point. You also look at other psychedelic modalities like, psilocybin, for example, which is on the
Yeah.
mushroom side, mescaline, which is, the peyote and, San Pedro side, and then you have the synthetics like LSD and DMT and these types of things. Um, and what's nice about, MDMA, I should say, what's nice about, this area is ever since Roland Griffiths did the heavy lifting at Johns Hopkins, the scientific and academic community is starting to come around to the concept that psychedelics can be very useful as a therapeutic intervention, either as a frontline or a supportive therapy, like MDMA combined with talk therapy, for example, is just incredible for PTSD treatment. So we're very interested in it. Been to MAPS conferences before. We're
Nice.
gonna we're gonna do studies. The only barrier right now is the federal government still classifies the vast majority of these as Schedule 1, which means they're illegal. Ketamine is a Schedule 3 drug because it's been around for a very long time. It actually started as a pediatric drug for surgery in the 1970s. And so it's something we just really care
Mm.
about. We understand it's there, and it's awesome for mental health treatment. Now, your question was related to creativity and nonlinear thinking. Yes, psychedelics can enhance that, and I'd argue that they're quite powerful for this. And there's plenty of offshore programs where people do this to enhance creativity. But there's other things you can do that are similar to psychedelics that could be more powerful for that. Like for example, nobody really talks about focused ultrasound. And you can use focused ultrasound to knock a person to any mental state. There's this one research group that actually made people experience pure bliss, like the purest form of happiness you could ever have for
Have you
15
have you
minutes.
have you done that?
I'm gonna build a focused ultrasound
Oh,
department at my clinic because I'm so interested in
cool.
this. And I was really curious about stacking modalities, like combining focused ultrasound with TMS for depression treatment. But this fact that you could knock a brain state into a flow state or, knock the default mode network into a different state so you can go into a psychedelic trip or make a person happy, for a period of time. That's really interesting. And focused ultrasound is super precise. You can have three-dimensional targeting. With TMS, it's a little harder because if you want to get to a deeper brain structure, you hit surface areas with more magnetic fields, and that
Mm.
may be a problematic for the therapeutic intervention. So it's a much more precise instrument, but you need better mapping. So it's actually really interesting to combine fMRI with focused ultrasound as a
Mm.
approach. But it's absolutely somewhere interesting because you can enhance creativity as well with it.
Yeah. Um, Charles, this conversation went in a million ways I didn't think it would go, but I I enjoyed it a lot. Anything that you really I realized actually we have hardly I don't even think we've talked about midnight. We've hardly talked about some of the Cardano stuff. But I was a little more focused on like the guy behind the protocol here. But anything that you really want to cover that we haven't?
Well, if you wanna share your screen one more time, I really would love to go back to, EUTXO, .org, 'cause,
Wait.
I
So tell me the website. EUTXO.org.
yeah, and so if you take a look at this, so this is a real-time view of the Cardano network, and, I say it, but then it's easier to just show people what's going on.
This?
Yeah, and so let's let it, load up. And so this is a real-time view. It's always dangerous to do real-time views. So each of those little blocks is a transaction. So you see that giant little block there? That's a single transaction. And that transaction had all those are NFT issued. So if you click on them, you can see what's issued, swaps, asset
Huh.
transfers, other things like that. So this is a real view of the network. So I have no idea what's going to come for the next block, what's there, but you can kind of see Cardano living and breathing. And this is the kind of stuff that I get up every morning and I say, I want to see this happen where you build something, and this was a community member who put it together, and you just bet right on the paradigm. Those can get bigger and bigger over time. So you can have thousands of events in a single transaction. And eventually those transactions will be proofs that can contain rollups. So it's an infinitely scalable system. And then we talk about midnight or other things like that. Those are really just extensions of this dream, that we have. And by the way, all those scripts there, they're going to be Bitcoin interoperable now that because we have Bitcoin VMX. So we can write an Aiken smart contract in Rust on Cardano, cross compile, it runs on Cardano, it runs on Bitcoin, and it's a hybrid application. You know, so this took 10 years
Hmm.
of time and effort and thought to kind of put together. But now that we're here, it's this magical system. And in the same system, you have all three things: economic, political, and social. You have voting transactions for the on chain government that controls that $1.2 billion treasury. You have economic transactions moving money. You have dApps and DeFi basically going on. You have all this cool stuff happening real time and this crossroads. And this is what I signed up for crypto to be, and it's fully decentralized. If you go to the Edinburgh Decentralization Index, Cardano is the most decentralized cryptocurrency on the planet. We met with NIST while we were in Washington D.C. to talk about could we use NIST to start thinking about decentralization so it can start properly measuring this as a metric people care about. And so if you it's just like one overarching thing across my entire career. I look for these interaction points where everything just kind of comes together into one beautiful visualization. And when you see that visualization, then you kind of get it. You say, well, this is why we signed up for crypto. We wanted to run society on a blockchain. We wanted to have one system that could think about all these things.
Hmm.
And each and every part of this was made with love. The address format, how to visualize these things, how to think about the theoretical properties of UTXO. We talk about 250 papers. This is where those papers ended up. And when we talk about like the vision of the future, like those boxes can become arbitrarily large, and those boxes can contain more and more semantical data, and every one of those is just a single transaction. So you can horizontally and vertically shard, and semantically you can always improve the programmability and expressiveness of the system. And the fact that in one system you can have voting, in one system you can have data storage, in one system you can have programmability, in one system you can have your banking system. And by the way, Cardano native assets can pay now transaction fees in the native assets. When you issue an asset on Cardano, you pay you can pay the fee with the asset, like you have your own layer one. It's called Babel fees. It's just it's magical that all that came together. And like 95% of that I didn't build. I came up with it and helped write some of the papers and started it, but I didn't create this website. I didn't create the vast majority of the dApps and NFT projects or other things that are here. It's a thriving, vibrant ecosystem. And unfortunately, in the podcast sphere, when people talk about Cardano, they have no clue about any of this. They don't even know this exists. So they just reduce the entire project to me. And they say it's
Hmm.
just Charles and it's all just one big marketing
Well,
game or something
Charles,
like
why
that.
is that? Why do you think that like you are not in the crypto insider crowd, but like Solana is in the insider
Because we
crowd?
never
Or
took any venture capital. And we were funded by a bunch of random Japanese people, 10 years ago in a place that most people have never been, like Osaka, Japan. Like, if people go to Japan, they go to fucking Tokyo. Who goes to Osaka? I mean, it's like we were so far off the beaten path, nobody knew who we were and nobody cared. And so they just had because there was no way to interface with it, invest in it, get an insider deal, get an insider distribution, these types of things. They basically just wrote us off or said, well, we don't understand it, so we don't care about it. The other thing is that Cardano was built with very exotic technology, like
mm,
Haskell and all this peer review. So to understand Cardano in the beginning days, you had to read academic papers and programming language that most people didn't understand. So nobody really wanted to take the time to invest. So they just wrote it off. And also, we never followed these mega trends, these well, I shouldn't say mega trends, but rather the flavor of the week trends, like NFT mania, for example. Remember that in 2021? And we
Yeah.
didn't follow meme coin mania where Solana did. And so because we weren't in the conversation, they just assumed Cardano was dead and it was gone, like
Yeah.
EOS or these other things. Meanwhile, we were just building and we were doing cool things, and there was an internal community that was doing all this interesting stuff. And so we do need to open up, and that's what Midnight's about, and that's what Bitcoin DeFi is about. But on the other hand, we can't sacrifice what made Cardano Cardano. It's super fucking cool that you can just go to that website in real time. You can just see, like no other system, the heart of it, like what's happening. Like literally NFTs are being issued, and scripts are running, and money's moving at scale of billions of dollars every week. It's extraordinary. And what I live for is, like, if I keep doing my job in 10 years, imagine what that website's going to look like. Could you imagine a website where the entire commercial layer of the United States was visualized real time? It would be the coolest thing in the world to see that. And we could see that with Cardano. So it's always the way I like to end these types of interviews, and kind of like show people that, because it says it's a thing, and it's not
Yeah.
one person's thing. It's the aggregation of the hopes and dreams of so many people.
Charles, man, you're a fascinating person. Thanks for coming on. You've congrats on everything. It's an impressive journey. I think a lot of people are rooting for you. So appreciate the time.
Thanks, Yano.